Well, good morning, and thank you for joining this webinar. This is Contract Closeout. It is the 10th in a series of webinars from the Alabama A&M University RISE Foundation, developed as part of a cooperative agreement with NASA in an effort to give minority-serving institutions a competitive advantage in federal contracting opportunities. Before we begin, we do have a message from Mr. Clarence Bostic, who will explain the purpose of this webinar series.
Hello, my name is Clarence Bostic. I'm the MURA Education Specialist and Music Activity Manager at NASA's Langley Research Center. MURA is the Minority University Research and Education Program and is part of the Office of STEM Engagement for NASA. Music is one of its many projects. But what is music? Music stands for MURA for Sustainability and Innovation Collaborative. It's a cooperative agreement for teams of minority-serving institutions, also called MSIs, and nonprofit institutions to create and provide workshops and training materials establishing sustainable support for MSIs that desire to develop their institution's capacity through the competition for federal funds. Why is music important? The expectation is that the awardees will train MSIs to develop their institutional capacity, better enabling them to compete for federal funding opportunities. These endeavors then result in successful application to and management of new funding opportunities, including those at NASA. The agreement extends MSI's capabilities by leveraging the MSI's research with NASA research to develop small business innovation research and small business technology transfer projects. Together, these partnerships develop and demonstrate innovative technologies that fulfill NASA's needs and have significant potential for successful commercialization. The music agreement also increases the preparation of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics faculty with opportunities to participate with NASA researchers and agency missions through grants and contracts. So what does music mean to you? By participating, we want you to apply for more NASA contracts, SBIR and STTR projects, as well as other federal funds. MSIs are given additional strategies to manage their federal funding opportunities. So what do you need to do now? Take full advantage of this opportunity. Learn about NASA's resources. Participate in the process. Collaborate with other participants. Prepare your institution's capability statement. And finally, sign up for the NASA Office of Small Business Programs vendor database. Ultimately, the goal of any proposed activity or combination of activities should enable faculty and associated staff of sponsored research programs to learn to compete for and effectively manage contracts primarily, as well as grants or other federal funding sources. Thank you.
So, I would like to begin by introducing myself. I am Sharon Brooks Hodge, Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Phenomenal Management Partners. We're a consulting firm that was hired to manage this webinar series for the Alabama A&M University RISE Foundation. And RISE is the acronym for Research, Innovation, Science, and Engineering. And PMP is supporting the RISE Foundation in this cooperative agreement with NASA. So let's start with today's webinar. In today's session, we will be discussing the acquisition lifecycle, defining contract closeout, contract completion, contract closeout checklist, time standards, the contract closeout process, which includes when the contract is physically complete, compliance with terms and conditions, legal matters resolved, closeout documents initiated, closeout documents obtained, final settlement and payment, and lastly, all records cleared and the contract closed. And if you have any questions, please type them in the chat bar and I will address questions at the end of the presentation. So closeout is the final phase in a contract's life cycle. It is the grave in cradle-to-grave acquisition process. When performed in a timely and effective manner, a closeout provides two specific benefits. It protects both your university and the government from a legal standpoint, and it identifies unused government funding. To close out a contract, the contracting officer must establish that each party has fully satisfied its obligation to the other. Your university, the contractor, has delivered everything the contract required, and the government has paid the university in full. Contract closeout is important because without this final step, the government can't settle its books. Unliquidated balances, which are the funds remaining on a contract after the performance has ended, are an accounting nightmare and could prevent the agency from receiving a clean audit. A contract closeout occurs when a contract has met all the terms of a contract and all administrative actions have been completed, all disputes have been settled, and final payment has been made. This includes those administrative actions that are contractually required, like property, security, patents, and royalties. The procedures for contract closeout are located in the Federal Acquisition Regulation, the FAR, and you can use the link that's provided in this presentation to read the specific regulations associated with contract closeout. And as always, we encourage you to have someone on your team become familiar with the FAR. The first step in contract closeout is to determine who is responsible for closing out the contract. You will find this in the Administered By block on the contract award form, or on the latest modification if the contract was modified during its execution. Upon contract completion, you will notify the contract administrator and the finance representative in writing to close all activity numbers and put the project in an inactive status. And specifically how you do that will depend on what type of management software you are using. Activities required for formal contract closeout include written notification from the project manager to the contract administrator that all deliverables, CDRLs, and etc. have been provided to the customer, which is the agency, and that nothing else is due under the contract. A CDRL is the acronym for Contract Data Requirement List, and that's a list of the authorized data requirements for a specific procurement, and it typically is linked directly to the statement of work. Also included in the formal contract closeout is making sure that government furnished property has been inventoried and accounted for. If you have any patents, they need to have been recorded, and then you should be preparing your final invoice. So this is a standard checklist over on the right-hand side. That's a standard checklist of the administrative actions that are required to close out a contract. And again, they are specified in the FAR, that all the terms and conditions have been met. Some agencies have their own closeout checklist. NASA is one of those agencies. And it might be helpful for you to know what steps the agency is taking internally to close out a contract. So the PDF version of this presentation, which will be sent to you following today's webinar, the PDF includes a copy of this checklist. You'll just click on the image to download it. The purpose of the checklist is to improve the contract closeout process by standardizing the process across NASA centers, ensuring that contractors use procedures as specified in the contract, and implementing best practices across the agency. During the contract closeout, your university will issue an interim contract completion statement, ensure disposition of classified material is completed, receive final patent or royalty report clearance, ensure there are no outstanding value engineering change proposals, ensure property clearance is recorded in MOCAs, and MOCAs is the acronym for Mechanization of Contract Administration Services, Your university will receive and file plant clearance report, settle all interim or disallowed costs, complete price revision, ensure that any subcontracts have been settled. That means all your subcontractors need to be paid by the time that you close out the contract. Settle prior year indirect cost rates. Ensure submission of final subcontracting plan report. Complete termination docket. Complete contract audit. Ensure receipt of contractor's closing statement. Review or submit the contractor's final invoice or invoice voucher. Ensure that the voucher has been paid, and complete contract funds review and de-obligate any excess funds. Keep in mind that for fixed price contracts, there should be no excess funds to de-obligate because the contractor, that's you, the university, is entitled to bill for the total amount. To assist you in closing out a contract, the General Services Administration has created a contract closeout reference guide, and we are sharing it with you in this presentation. As I said, when you receive the PDF version, just click on the image to download it. So let's talk about the time standards. You should be aware that there are time standards associated with closing out a contract. The time standards are based on the type of contract that you have. Contracts involving simplified acquisition procedures should be closed out within 30 days of the final payment. And simplified acquisition procedures currently are not exceeding the Simplified Acquisition Threshold, or SAT, and that is specified in FAR Part 13. Again, this is why we encourage you to become familiar with the FAR. Firm fixed price contracts without simplified acquisition procedures should be closed out within 60 days. Cost reimbursement contracts involving settlement of indirect costs should be closed out within 36 months. All other types of contracts should be closed within 20 months. And again, these time standards are included in the guide that we referenced on the previous slide that was created by the GSA, as well as in the FAR. So now let's take a look at that process. It starts when the contract is physically complete, and it includes ensuring compliance with the terms and conditions of your contract, resolving legal matters, initiating closeout documents, then obtaining those documents, and you will receive a final payment and clear all records associated with the contract. When the contract is physically complete, that's the time to start the closeout with the form DD-250, which is the name for the material inspection report, which is required for most fixed price contracts. Again, we have provided a copy of that form for you here, the DD-250, which you can download using the link provided in the presentation. To ensure compliance with all terms and conditions, you will need to carefully review your contract and any modifications to the contract. And then you would resolve, if applicable, any of the following: a value engineering change proposal, engineering change proposal, award fee final. That's if the contract was an award fee type contract. And is the warranty complete? Are there any outstanding legal matters? Contract closeout is the time to resolve them. Such legal issues might be royalties, claims, terminations, equitable adjustments, defective pricing, litigation, disputes, data rights, patents. Arrangements should be made for the disposition of government property, classified material. It's going to be the responsibility of your contract management team to initiate these closeout documents. You're going to make sure that the patent and plant clearance is in process. You're going to review and release any withholds and initiate the unliquidated obligations and execution of the interim billing and adjustments. After you initiate the documents, you will work with the agency to review them once they have been completed and sent to you. You will need to verify that all subcontracts have been closed. Settle the final price and issue a modification if necessary. Verify your final invoice and that the payment has been made. Verify that any excess funds have been cleared. And please keep in mind what I said earlier, that if you have a firm fixed price contract and there are extra funds, you can bill for those. You do not have to send those back. And then the last step then is to reconfirm that there are no outstanding issues. And with that, the contract is closed. So now let me check the chat box and see if anybody has any questions. Did anybody have any questions? What I would like to point out, though, is the most important part is following the checklist and ensuring that all the terms and conditions of your contract were met. And if you work with the agency's person on the contract closeout, it'll be easier because you'll be in sync on what is open and what has not been resolved. So use the checklist, which is why we provided them for you so that you can begin to prepare for what you need to provide and to determine who on the other side is going to be closing the contract out on their end. If during the replay of this webinar you do come up with questions, you can email them to me, and my email address is here on the slide presentation. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box. Remember that if we're using terms that you are unfamiliar with, perhaps you missed one of our previous webinars, they are available on our web portal, theknowledgesharingcenter.com. Just when you enter the site, go to the webinar page, and the previous webinars are there. And we also have PDF versions. If you do not want to watch it as a video, you can download the PDF. We have prepared a workbook that will assist you not only in understanding the contracting process, but it'll help give you a 90-day action plan to help you implement everything that you have learned. And again, thank you for attending today's webinar. This was Contract Closeout. Have a good day.